This video is the most important hair loss video I've ever made, and I'm gonna tell you exactly why. So the three most important things when it comes to successfully regrowing hair at any age are: one, knowing what type of hair loss you have, because guys have a lot of different types of hair loss, and if you try and treat one type a certain way and it's not the right type, you won't get results, right? And number two is knowing how aggressive your hair loss is. If you have really aggressive hair loss and you try and treat it with just a mildly aggressive stack, you won't get results. You won't see any regrowth. You might slow it down a little bit, but you won't see actual regrowth. So you need to get that right, and you need to understand how aggressive your hair loss is. And for both these points, we actually now have two new calculator tools that have been medically approved that you can use to calculate the answers to both of these questions, right? So in this video, you'll be able to use these two free tools, and I'm going to show you exactly how, and you'll be able to calculate the type of hair loss you have and how aggressive your hair loss is. And then after that, number three, you're going to build a treatment stack that is exactly right for you and your hair and your situation. So if you get any of these parts wrong, you won't get results that you're happy with. And this is what I see all the time for people who don't get results. They don't understand these 3 points. So if you get them all three right, you're practically guaranteed to see great results. So this is me, age 26. I had extremely receded and thin hair. And I know it's a bit of a funny angle for a photo, but basically I was so embarrassed about having photos taken of my hair that I just never had any photos from that period, or not many. And this photo was actually taken with a drone, from a drone. So I just happened to capture this angle. And this is obviously me now. So my hair's not perfect by any means, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was. And that was 10 years ago with aggressive male pattern baldness. So it is possible to get your hair back, to improve it, and to keep it over the long term. And that's super important, is having a routine that's sustainable over the long term. And you can also see results like this guy at 52. So in this video, I'm going to show you these two brand new free calculator tools that you can use to help regrow your hair. So you'll answer 5 questions, and then you'll calculate, and then it will calculate a score for you. And that answer will help you understand which hair loss treatments will work for you and why they'll work and how they'll work. So like I just said, this is the most important video I've ever made on hair loss. So stay tuned. Make sure you watch it step by step and through to the end. Look, it's going to go into quite a lot of detail, and it's going to be, it is going to be a detailed step-by-step video. So just stick with it, and I promise you, your hair will benefit a lot from this video. So moving on, just if you've ever looked at hair loss treatments and you've just felt confused and just wonder, what should I use? Why should I use that? How should I combine them together? Then this is the right video for you. And this is how you know, oh, this is for me. I know this will work for me, and I should combine it with this because they work better together. So let's get into the meat of the video. And that's the first step, and that's diagnosing your hair loss. So this is crucially important. Diagnosis must precede treatment. One of the biggest mistakes, if not the biggest mistake, when treating hair loss is that people think that it's all the same, right? But there are actually many different types of hair loss in men. And each different type has a different cause and therefore a different solution. So if you try and treat your hair loss without knowing what type you have, you simply won't get good results. It's literally as simple as that. And people always make this mistake. So people can have combinations of one or more types of hair loss. So the first step to giving yourself the best chance of success is understanding what type or types you have. So this is what this section is for, and this is why we created this free tool that I'm going to show you how to use. And just another little side point is most men think that hair loss looks like this, right? You're expecting to be pulling hairs out in the comb, but in reality, hair loss for men actually looks like this. It's this hair follicle miniaturization that's a lot more difficult to tell what it is and to tell that it's happening. And that's why a lot of men lose hair without really realizing that it's happened. So going on to look at the different types of hair loss, let's go through this, and then I'll show you how to use that free tool. So androgenetic alopecia, I'll refer to it as AGA from now on, also called male pattern baldness. We all know this one. This is the type of hair loss we will be focusing on fixing in this presentation after this section. So it's characterized by its distinctive pattern, and it takes place through a process known as hair follicle miniaturization. So around 80% of men will experience AGA in their lifetime, but it can also be mixed in with those other types. So we need to make sure that you don't have those first. And this was me. I had AGA. You can see that deeply receded hairline is just the hallmark of male pattern baldness, right? So moving on, next up we have telogen effluvium. This is the second most common type of hair loss in men, and a fairly large percentage of men will experience it in their lifetime. And this is characterized by excessive shedding of hair, and it's easily mistaken for AGA. But it's actually more easily reversible, and it has different treatments than AGA. So you need to know if you have it to treat it correctly. And it's very often mixed in with AGA, so they need separate treatments. And you can see this is the typical sort of telogen effluvium picture. So you've got diffuse thinning, but there's not that clear pattern. There's not that clear widow's peak at the front. So you can imagine if you mix that with that, you're going to get something that's quite hard to distinguish. So moving on, alopecia areata, the lifetime risk is around 2%. It's fairly obvious because it presents itself in these certain patches, which are quite easy to see. So it's typically non-scarring and can range from small patches to extensive hair loss. And it often regrows spontaneously, although recurrences are possible. So this one is usually a bit easier to see if you've got it. Then moving on, I've kind of grouped these together into the smaller types of hair loss. So frontal fibrosing alopecia, traction alopecia, folliculitis, and tinea capitis. So, and there's other ones in this group as well. But basically, if you have any sort of issues to do with the scalp, like really excessive oiliness, excessive dryness, or infections, or some sort of skin condition, there's a good chance that the hair loss that you have is at least partially not AGA. So it's coming from one of these scalp conditions. And this would require further investigation and specialist treatment. So that is something to watch out for. If your scalp has some sort of condition that could be contributing to AGA, and you need to fix it differently than AGA. Right, so going back to the start, let's go on to look at our free pre-diagnostic tool. So we simply had so many people asking these questions about what type of hair loss do I have, and like, this didn't work for me, and it just made me think that you have another type of hair loss, basically. So with the help of like specialists and doctors, we've made a free tool that's like simple and helpful. And I put the link to it in the description down below, so you can head over to this link and just use it for yourself. So I'll take you through it now. I'll show you what it's all about, and then I'll show you how to use it and go from there. So you'll come to this page. If you want to stay up to date on these tools, then you can put your email in there, and we'll keep you updated on these tools. So basically, you want to go to this, click on this button, and it will take you to this tool first. And you've got 5 questions. Each question has 5 answers, and you want to click the one that describes you best. And then basically you'll click calculate, and you'll get a score from there. So going back, let me explain what these questions are all about. So firstly, your pattern. Looking at the pattern of hair loss is the clearest indication of the type of hair loss. If you have that clear, well-defined pattern, starting at the temples and recessing backwards with the crown area too, then this is a really strong indication of AGA. So some men have diffuse thinning and a pattern, and this is usually more difficult to diagnose because AGA can take place in slightly different patterns. But diffuse thinning on top will basically mean further investigation is needed. And diffuse thinning with no clear pattern, like no temporal recession, likely shows a different type of hair loss, not AGA. And you can see this was me about 10 years ago. I had that deeply receded hairline, and I was probably a NW3. So you can remember this graphic when you put in your NW number. Right, moving on, we've got family history. If the men in your family have a history of male pattern baldness, this makes it much more likely that you do too. So the main people to look at: the father, mother's father, father's father, and the simple question to ask were they losing hair at my age to that same degree? And you can see down here, Jason Statham with his dad. So moving on, we've got the rate of hair loss. So did your hair loss take place slowly or suddenly? If there was a sudden change in your hair loss, then that points to a non-AGA driven hair loss. Stress is a big one. Lifestyle, diet, medication, season, big life changes, they can all cause this shedding, but that isn't necessarily AGA. AGA is typically so slow that you hardly realize that it's happening, and it's rarely accompanied by lots of visible hairs coming out, which is why I kind of mentioned at this point, you might expect to see lots of hairs coming out, but actually it's the hair follicles miniaturizing over time. So hair follicle miniaturization is a hallmark of male pattern baldness, and it means your hairs basically, they grow back more slowly, thinner and wispier. And that's why it is often hard to detect. Moving on, your overall health. If it feels like you've been in poor health lately and that's coincided with more hair loss, that's a reason to look into potential other causes besides AGA. And if you feel like your overall health, things like stress, diet, lifestyle are all great, and your hair continues to worsen, that likely points to AGA-driven hair loss. Okay, finally, we have your scalp health. So certain scalp conditions make hair loss worse, so it's helpful to rank your overall scalp health. Although AGA can be accompanied by more oiliness or more dandruff than usual, it shouldn't be extreme. If you do have those unusual or extreme scalp conditions, it's highly likely that they are actually contributing to your hair loss, and it's worth looking into as a non-AGA driven type of hair loss. So with that in mind, we can go through the tool, and I'll just go through it how I would, and you'll get a score. So number one, I had a very clear pattern. I had a very strong history of male pattern baldness. I had quite gradual and thinning recession. I'd say it happened over years. I had pretty good overall health. I wouldn't say it was incredible, but at that time it was pretty good overall. And I'd probably give myself this one, so like a 2, a pretty good overall scalp health. So I'll calculate that and it comes out as a 1.4. So let me explain this score. So 1 to 2 is a very strong chance of AGA-driven hair loss. 2 to 3, strong chance of AGA, but with the potential for some other factors that you might want to look into. Now, 3 to 4, your chance of AGA, there is a chance of AGA, but other hair loss types are pretty likely to be present. So pretty likely. And then 4 to 5, there's just a very high chance of other hair loss types present. It's unlikely to be primarily AGA. So this is really important now. If you scored above a 3, then there's not really any point in proceeding with the rest of this video, because the rest of this video is primarily for AGA hair loss only, or it is for AGA hair loss. So, and by the way, this is not a medical diagnosis. This is just for educational purposes only. So go and click on that link and go and calculate your score, get your score. And then if you're below a 3, carry on with this video. If you're above a 3, then let me just explain. So if you scored 3+, now's the time to stop this video and go and get a professional diagnosis with the dermatologist, because you might have AGA, but there's a very, very high chance that you have another type of hair loss. And you kind of need to focus on fixing that one first, because you'll get quick wins from fixing the other types of hair loss, and they will require a slightly different treatment, or it could be a completely different treatment. So a dermatologist will help you understand what other types of hair loss you have, and you can get the quick wins by fixing those first. And then if the rest of this video is just for scores 1 to 3, where AGA is the main driver of hair loss. So let's go to the next section. If you scored below 3, this is for you. And this is super, super important, because it's all about how aggressive is your hair loss. So firstly, what is hair loss aggressiveness? It's basically the speed at which the AGA is progressing. And this is the number 2 thing that most people do not understand when it comes to the hair. Like, obviously the number 1 is the diagnosis, the first thing. If you have highly aggressive hair loss and you treat it with a low aggressive stack, you will still lose hair. And if you have low aggressive hair loss and you treat it with an overly aggressive stack, it's just going to be overkill, and you're more likely to quit because it's just too much and you're getting side effects. So obviously you want to be slightly more aggressive than less aggressive, but overall you want to match your treatment stack with your speed of hair loss. So hair loss aggressiveness, it does vary massively between individuals. And it's something that I never hear anyone talking about, but it is very, very important to know how aggressive your hair loss is, right? You can't treat it all the same. You can imagine a young guy, maybe in his late teens, say he's 19, and he's already losing his hair, has already got a receding hairline. And he has a strong history of male pattern baldness, you know, like I had. And then you can imagine, say, a guy in his mid-50s, he's just got a slight receding hairline. That's both AGA, but one has very aggressive hair loss, very aggressive AGA, and one doesn't. And those guys giving them the same treatment stack, one is still going to lose hair and one is going to regrow his hair. So it's super, super important. And let me show you this tool that's going to help you calculate it. So the 4 key factors we can use to calculate aggressiveness: age. So obviously hair loss at a younger age indicates much more aggressive hair loss. Severity, how far has your hair loss already progressed? Family history, do the men in your family have a history of male pattern baldness? The more men, the more aggressive. And your goal, so is your goal just to stop the hair loss, or do you actually want to regrow some of the hair you lost? So just so you know, the severity, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So have a look on this chart, see where you fall, and then get your number, and then put it into the tool. So for me, these were my stats, and let me show you how I'm going to use the tool. So if you click on this button, it takes you to our second tool. So just put in your age here. So I'm doing mine for back when I was 26. 26 years old, I was an NW3. My family history was all the men in my family were bald, and I wanted to reverse my hair loss. So click calculate, and this gives me a score of 5. So let me explain the scores to you. So just quickly pause the video, go and get your score before we continue on to the next section. And basically you'll need that score to build out your hair care routine based on the hair loss cascade. And let me explain these scores. So 1 is slow, it's non-aggressive hair loss. You still have AGA, but it's very mild, it's not aggressive. 2 is fairly slow, it's mild hair loss. 3 is mildly aggressive, so you're getting into that mid-range. And then 4 is fairly fast and fairly aggressive. And then 5 is, fast and aggressive, like I had when I was 26. So I had aggressive hair loss. So go and calculate your score, and then we'll use that score in the next section to build out the treatment stack. So this is really important, and it's important that you understand what's going on with AGA. And to understand AGA, you need to look at the hair loss cascade. So it basically shows you all the steps involved in male pattern baldness from the root cause all the way down. And it shows you how and why various different treatments work and how effectively they work based on where they sit on the hair loss cascade. So you must understand this because AGA is a chronic condition, so you need to get to the root cause of it if you want to win that battle against hair loss that you're going to have to be fighting for the rest of your life. So that's why you really, really want to get to the root cause. So let's go on and let me explain a bit more about how this works. So just quickly, every treatment that helps with AGA sits somewhere on the hair loss cascade, which I'm about to show you in just a second. So a treatment that's further up the cascade is more effective over the long term, but treatments can be very effectively combined because they work through different mechanisms. So you will want to combine the right treatments based on how aggressive your hair loss is and your personal preferences. And obviously, long-term success comes from a routine that's effective, sustainable, and has minimal side effects. So let me just take you on a quick tangent. I want to show you something that's kind of interesting about how hair loss treatments can work. So this is the power of stacking correctly. So kind of you have this thing that's going from bad to good, basically contraindicative. It means adding multiple treatments for the same condition produces worse results, like they don't combine well, basically. Then you have diminishing returns, which means the incremental benefit of adding new treatments decreases to the point where it's not worth it to add new ones. And then even better, or better, basically you have additive. So combining treatments is worth it because the individual tends to add together to give the individual treatments add together to give a better result overall. And then finally you have synergistic, and I can't really say this word here, multiplicative, which is basically combining treatments tends to multiply the results, right? So this is what you really, really want when you're trying to fix hair loss, because hair loss it's a difficult condition to fix, to be honest. And you need to you want to get this synergistic effect when you combine treatments together. So it's known as the synergistic effect. And this can happen with hair loss treatments because of the way the hair loss cascade works. And there are many examples of this in the studies. And that's what we're aiming for, basically. It's kind of like 1 + 1 equals, 3. You're getting that synergistic effect when you combine treatments together. So a brief overview of the hair loss cascade If you haven't watched this video already, you need to go and watch that right after this video, and it will give you the full explanation on exactly what male pattern baldness is and the hair loss cascade. So I'll link to that down below. Go and watch it after this video. It's very, very important. So moving on to the hair loss cascade, you can basically see what causes hair loss from start to finish, all the way down. And really interestingly, you can see every single hair loss treatment for male pattern baldness sits somewhere on this hair loss cascade. And the most important thing to consider is that as you go down the hair loss cascade, these treatments get less effective over the long term because you're getting away from the root cause. So I'll just quickly explain it. Basically, we have scalp tension as the root cause. This leads to scalp compression on some areas of the scalp more than others. That leads to scalp inflammation. And in the presence of DHT, that leads to this protein becoming activated called transforming growth factor beta 1. And as this protein activates, it causes fibrosis, which is scar tissue formation in response to the chronic inflammation. And this fibrosis essentially leads to the scalp layer becoming thinner, harder, and stiffer, and it loses that layered structure that is so important to the functioning of the hair follicle. And as that takes place, it reduces the growth space, and it reduces the blood flow, and it reduces the structural integrity of the hair follicle. Imagine that hair follicle, a delicate organ, being squeezed as the scalp gets squeezed and becomes thin, hard, and stiff. And then what happens is the hair follicles struggle to grow. They miniaturize with every hair cycle because they're, the place where they're sitting, the dermis, is being constricted. It's becoming thin, hard, and stiff. And it's the reduced space and the reduced blood flow and the reduced structural integrity. And that then leads to hair loss in a pattern. And that's why we call it male pattern baldness. So you can see every hair loss treatment sits somewhere on this cascade. And these are the ones that generally just help the sort of holistic growth of the hair follicle. The hair follicle is struggling to grow, and these just give it a little bit of extra oomph, but they're certainly not getting to the root cause. So things like supplements, collagen, diet, stress, posture, sleep, water quality, and LLLT to a certain extent. And then moving up the hair loss cascade, you have things that improve the blood flow, right? So minoxidil, LLLT, topical caffeine, rosemary and peppermint oil, and then PRP. And then moving further up the hair loss cascade, you have things that deal with fibrosis. So microneedling was originally invented to help deal with scar tissue. So it helps re-heal that scarred tissue in the skin. And that's why it was originally used. And it works for hair loss because it helps reduce fibrosis. And PRP also helps with that to a certain extent. And scalp massages help with fibrosis to a certain extent. And then moving up again, you have the DHT. So this is why DHT blockers work. Things like finasteride, dutasteride, saw palmetto, ketoconazole, pumpkin seed oil, they all help with hair loss by blocking DHT. And then finally, moving up to the root cause, you've got things like scalp massages, and then automated scalp massages with a grow band. And then you've got basically Botox that helps when injected in the scalp muscles. It relaxes the scalp muscles, and that's why it regrows hair. So keep this in mind and keep your hair loss aggressiveness score in mind, because we're about to build out the treatment stack that will work for you. So these are all the treatments I put in these buckets that you're going to stack together and create your own personal stack. So let me just quickly go through and explain what these are and how they work and why they help. So I've grouped this together into the holistic button. This is essentially holistically covering your bases. So this is the stuff that you should be doing anyway because it benefits your overall health. And I've written out this long list, which you can read through. It's basically, getting your nutrients and vitamins, high protein, avoiding inflammatory foods, getting good gut health, reducing chronic stress, good posture, good sleep, high quality drinking water, filtering your shower water, avoiding low quality shampoos, getting enough sun, vitamin D, and avoiding hair styling and heating products. So this is going to be the first step for everyone with hair loss. And the question is why? This stuff is actually quite hard work. It's quite time consuming, and it actually has fairly low impact. This is at the bottom of the hair loss cascade. It's at this point on the hair loss cascade. So it doesn't have that much impact. But what I would say is that all of these will benefit your overall health. And I do truly believe that investing in your health is the best ROI that you can get in life. So why not do these first and go from there? Because they're going to help your overall health, and they're going to help your hair too, and they're going to help the rest of the treatment stack. So this is what I call holistically covering your bases. Right, next up, we have manual scalp massages, which if you've watched my other video and you understand the hair loss cascade, you'll understand that this is getting to the root cause of AGA, because it helps with that scalp tension that compresses the scalp, and that basically stops the rest of the hair loss cascade. So scalp massages tackle this root cause, and they also help reverse fibrosis. So it's kind of like a double whammy, right? It's a two-pronged approach. And scalp massages are free, they're easy to do, and they're very powerful when you do them consistently over the long term. So these are a must-do because they're the highest up the hair loss cascade, and they have 0 side effects. So the two main things to get right: use the right techniques, and then be consistent and build a habit that's sustainable. Right, moving on, we have topicals. So activating hair growth topically and with minimal side effects. So topicals like minoxidil, they won't get to the root cause, but it's a solid option because it's fairly cheap and it has a low side effect profile. The downsides are most people end up quitting topical minoxidil because of the application process, and it's just not that effective. And this bucket also includes other topical treatments like rosemary oil, peppermint oil, and topical caffeine. So you can use those ones and a mixture of those ones depending on your personal preferences. Okay, moving on to the next one. So the next one is DHT blockers mild. So I group these into mild DHT blockers, and that's essentially where people want to minimize the chances of side effects, but still block DHT. So we're essentially stopping fibrosis while minimizing side effects. DHT is a factor that's quite high up the hair loss cascade, and therefore DHT blockers are strongly effective and sustainable for AGA. The options that we have here are ketoconazole shampoo, saw palmetto, and pumpkin seed oil. And you could also potentially put low-dose finasteride into this group. So those are the options we have for DHT blockers mild. Next up, we have microneedling. This is reversing fibrosis and potentially increasing topical penetration. So microneedling helps because it reverses fibrosis and it helps improve the absorption of topicals. So as I said before, derma rolling was invented as a way to get rid of scar tissue, and fibrosis is essentially scar tissue. And fibrosis is around the middle of the hair loss cascade. So people find that it's fairly effective and it's a good option when combined with topicals. However, the major downside of microneedling is the inconvenience, the pain of doing it. And just to fill you in, generally most people find that the derma pen is the most convenient of the three options. So up here you can see we have the derma pen, the derma roller, and the derma stamp. And most people find that the derma pen is the most convenient. So basically, one big session once per week seems to work quite well. Okay, moving on, we have hands-free scalp massages. So this is basically taking scalp massages to the next level. So scalp massages are a base treatment for any man with AGA because they tackle the root cause, which is that chronic scalp tension. But the problem is manual scalp massages with your hands are quite hard work and they're just tiring to do. So we also know that the more time that you can spend doing them, the better results that you'll get. So anyone who needs a more aggressive protocol than manual scalp massages, an automated hands-free scalp massager like the Grow Band is the way to do it, because you can basically do it in a hands-free manner and it's just going to do it all for you. So the Grow Band, it's hands-free, lifts up the entire scalp perimeter, which reduces the muscular tension, reduces the scalp tension, and it simultaneously causes pinching and squeezing in the top of the scalp, which helps with the fibrosis. So manual scalp massages are great. Obviously, they're completely free, but someone looking to go to the next level and sort of save their time and effort and energy, the Grow Band is the next logical step. Okay, so moving on to the last one, we've got DHT blockers strong. So this is all about aggressively stopping fibrosis. And we have the two options, finasteride and dutasteride. And finasteride can be taken topically, administered topically, and can work well with lower chance of side effects when dosed correctly. So if someone finds that strong DHT blockers are causing side effects, they can typically reduce the dose until the side effects go away. So, obviously under a doctor's guidance, 0.25 milligrams can work well. So let's go and see how we can put these together in a way that really makes sense based on the score that you just calculated on the tool. And for me, it was a 5, but you will fall somewhere in here. And also, you just want to err on the side of caution. So if you got, say, a 1.5, you might want to do like a 2 kind of stack, if that makes sense. So let's build it out based on these buckets that we have. So the holistic stuff comes first, and this is going to be a sort of base treatment for everyone. And then for 1, you're also going to use the manual scalp massages. And then for 2, we want the holistic stuff. And then we also want the manual scalp massages. And then we'll basically just use a topical to add a little bit more regrowth power into that stack. And then moving on to 3, you want to cover your bases with the holistic stuff. You want to get to the root cause with the manual scalp massages. You want to also use the topical. And then you also want to add in the power of DHT blockers here. So mild DHT blockers could be appropriate for someone who's a 3 on the hair loss aggressiveness scale. Okay, so moving on to 4, you still want to be covering your bases. And then we actually want to move to the hands-free scalp massager, the grow band, because at this point you need that little bit more power, you need that more oomph, and that's going to give it to you. Then you also want to be using a topical, and you want to be still blocking DHT, so using the mild DHT blocker, and then also adding in microneedling to help deal with the fibrosis a little bit more. Okay, so on to number 5, you still want to be doing the holistic stuff. You want to be doing the hands-free scalp massages with the grow band, getting the regrowth power from the topicals. And then at this point, you want to bring in the strong DHT blockers, as that's just going to help completely stop fibrosis even more. And you also want to keep microneedling in there. So this isn't gospel, you know, this does have flexibility. This is how I would build it out based on that score. And that's kind of, you're matching your hair loss aggressiveness with the right kind of treatment stack that makes sense to minimize those side effects. Oh, and also, once you've calculated your score, you can write it down below in the comment section below. And I'm actually going to go through and give detailed answers to every single question that you write down below. I'm going to write out a detailed answer to try and help you as much as possible so that you can really build a treatment stack that makes the most sense for you. So don't be afraid to go and ask a question or just drop the scores that you've got down below. So to summarize this section, so number 1, you want to cover the holistic part of hair loss and the root cause, right? So that's the top and the bottom of the hair loss cascade. Number 2 covers the top and bottom of the hair loss cascade whilst adding a bit more hair regrowth power with the topical. Then number 3, anyone with 3 or above strongly needs to consider DHT, and thus we add a mild DHT blocker to the stack whilst keeping the rest the same. So number 3, we want to cover all of the hair loss cascade while swapping manual scalp massages for automated scalp massages with the grow band for that extra power and extra consistency. And then we add in microneedling to help reverse some of the fibrosis. And then finally, number 5, we need basically all the power we can get. So mild DHT blockers are swapped for strong DHT blockers to ensure no further fibrosis can take place. And that's going to give you the best possible chance of regrowth. So leave a comment down below with what score you got, and let me know if you have any questions or clarifications that you want. If you leave a detailed question about the stack that you're building and the score that you got, I will give you a detailed, comprehensive answer down below, and I'll really try to be as helpful as possible when I answer those questions. And I'm going to answer 100% of all the questions that are commented down below. So let me know with your comment. Also, please, it would be really helpful if you share this video with anyone who might have hair loss or is just worried about hair loss. Share this presentation with them so that they can also use the free tools to save them time and money, and obviously save them a lot of hair as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.